Yo, it's Brian Rose from London Real. What's up, you crazy cats? Just wanted to check in with you as 2012 is almost finished. What a crazy year it's been for us at London Real. We started off in January, not even having guests, I think, and we finished off the year. Came off the Joe Rogan show, and we're just about to clock 10 million downloads on iTunes. It's pretty mind-blowing, that whole number. I try not to think about it too much, but it's been a crazy ride, and it's been a real growth experience for all of us. It's amazing how much we've changed just by doing the show. I've drank ayahuasca 3 times now, something I would have never considered even a year and a half ago. I made some changes with myself. I moved in with a longtime girlfriend. Again, something I would have never considered doing. So I hope you've also made some changes too in your lives. All living things grow, and hopefully, this podcast inspired you somehow to do something different. I get a lot of emails from guys that start rolling jiu-jitsu, other emails, people that changed their diet, started meditating. So that's what I love to hear. And I hope this has affected you guys in some positive way. We got even crazier people than that out there. We got Wichita Real in the house this week. These guys in Kansas that started their own podcast. We got Twin Cities Real in Minnesota. They dropped one show on us. We're expecting more from those guys. Really enjoyed their first one. And we'll have Victoria Real coming at us very soon, I'm told, in British Columbia. And a few more, definitely. We got people in Texas I'm talking to, Germany, and even a few people in Asia. They're going to be dropping their podcast. And I can't emphasize this enough. Listening to podcasts can really change you, and doing your own can... you'll get so much more back than you give. So if you're thinking about it, if you're on the edge, man, just record a pilot and send me a copy, man. Once you do that, you got a lot of my time. So, check that out. Nick Gabriel is not with me this week because he's down in Peru drinking some crazy-ass ayahuasca, man. He's down there with some... high-level shaman drinking some potent brew. He was a bit scared going down there, which is the way you should feel before a ceremony. If you're not scared, then something's wrong. Only Nick Diaz might say, "Don't be scared, homie." But everyone else is. So Nick's gonna chase some of his demons down there, and I wish him the best, man. I hope he finds some of those bastards in that ceremony. So he'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be talking with Nick, getting the download there. Next year, we got all sorts of crazy stuff going on. We got Dorian Yates, legendary bodybuilder, who's going to be with us in January. I can't wait to get into his head. Very honored he's going to be with us. We've got the one and only Tim Ferriss, author of The 4-Hour Chef, who's going to be with us in mid-January. Can't wait to have Tim on. If you had asked me one guest when we started this show that would have been perfect for London Real, it would have been Tim. This guy's constantly pushing himself and exploring new ways of doing things, of questioning why we do things, which is really what this show is all about. So very excited to have Tim here. We've also got the UFC here in February. And we've got John Anik, who's confirmed to come on the show. He does the commentary when Rogan's not there. Really like John. He's got some cool energy. And I'm looking forward to maybe having 3 or 4 guests from the UFC that week. Different people, maybe fighters, commentary, maybe a cornerman, maybe a referee. And if you don't know much about the UFC, that's cool. You'll get a new perspective, man, and maybe learn something about something you don't know much about. So, we're bringing that. So excited, the stuff that's coming up next year, and we might be doing some new creative things for London Real as well. Maybe doing some different on-the-scene spots, or we might be doing some short pieces about music or anything, and it could be around the world. So if you have any ideas creatively to add to the show, please send me an email. You can reach us at info@londonreal.tv. I'm always reading these things and getting back to people. If anyone sent me a message, that I pretty much respond to everyone. And if you got any ideas, whether you want to be involved in the show or just have some thoughts, I'd like to take it to a kind of a different level, the show. I love how it is now, but I think we need to change. 2013 is going to be a big year, and I'm really looking forward to that. So So that's going on there. This week we've got artist and architect. Her name is Heidi Locher. She's a very cool lady. I stumbled onto her exhibit, which was called Hotel California, here in Shoreditch about a month ago, and it just blew my mind. It was visual, had a short film, had it was this huge space, like 10,000 square feet, and she's been in the business for a while, and she's even designed like some hotels and famous places here in London. And so it's interesting that she's an architect who also does art. And if you don't know much about art or you're alienated by it, man, I talk about that too. I'm like, how can every person get involved in art? So it's a great show. So check that out. As usual, we are sponsored by Audible. If you go to audiblepodcast.com/London Real and sign up for a trial membership, you get a free book. I'm listening now to Mastery by Robert Greene, who was our guest a couple weeks ago. He wrote 48 Laws of Power, Art of Seduction. He wrote The 50th Law with 50 Cent. Very smart guy, and I'm enjoying that book. Also, Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger. What a great listen. 20 hours, and you can say what you want about the man, but he pushes himself and has a lot of interesting things to say. So check those out. We're also sponsored by Onnit. If you go to onnit.com and check out their products, I've just shipped in some Hemp Force protein powder and some Bulletproof coffee. So that'll be here in the next couple weeks. I'm going to give you my review on how I feel about that. I've been off the whey proteins this year because of the ayahuasca diet, but I want to try some new protein supplements, and I'm gonna give that a shot. Of course, Alpha Brain is always in the house, so you can pick up those. Use the coupon code London Real, get 10% off, and keep the show free, which is what we're gonna do, no matter what. So that's it, man. I just want to send a lot of love out there to everyone who listens. The energy you guys give us as a feedback is it's more than enough. We love doing the show anyways. We're so lucky to meet such cool people every week, but to get, fan feedback on the back of it and be able to talk to you people and encourage other people to start podcasts, that's just gravy, really. It's just all gravy. So we're loving it, man. We're going to keep doing this. So stay in contact. Obviously, check us out. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please come check us out on YouTube or on Facebook, or come to our website, londonreal.tv. If you're feeling the love, hit us up with a quick review on iTunes. It just helps us out a lot. And that's it. Peace. Enjoy the show. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. This is Nick Gabriel. And joining us today is Heidi Locher, who is an artist and architect. She's been involved with buildings in London, such as the Soho Theatre. And most recently, she's had an exhibition here in Shoreditch called Hotel Califormia, which, quite frankly, impressed the hell out of me and Nick. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Lovely to be here, Gav.
That exhibit was just it was a real trip for us. It was been 5,000 or 10,000 square feet. It was visual. There was there was film there. There was a set. I'm actually gonna play on our video feed now just some clips from what Heidi filmed and some clips from her exhibit. So if you're listening on iTunes, if you go to YouTube channel London Real TV, you can see some of Heidi's art and get an idea for what we saw. how do you start from the inception of that idea and then get to the fruition and the creation of an exhibit like that? What's the process and how long does that take?
Well, in this case, I think it took from about March. It's a really immersive process, and which is why I completely love it, where you just take a conceptual idea and you take it all the way through. The start of this particular project was I was in an open-top car in LA, Sunset Strip, in the evening, with my fabulous mate Simon Moore, who's a writer up in the hills in LA, and on the radio came one of my favourite songs, which is the Eagles song, Hotel California, and we smiled wryly at each other, and then we started just talking about what marks us, as little people, as young people, as you're growing up, as you're emerging, not the sort of nature-nurture thing, not that argument, but actually the incidents and circumstances of your own childhood that make you who you are. And then that seed stayed with me, and I was brought up in a hotel, and so I started thinking about my life when I was very little, which I don't think you often do. I don't think you really investigate your childhood unless something really traumatic has happened. Being marked by things can be little things and big things, and they make up the parcel that is you. So the next day I was sitting very luxuriously by his swimming pool, starting to sort of sketch and storyboard the idea of Hotel California, and the idea was to take my own journey and think about that very deeply as a sort of deeply personal thing, and then somehow it emerged as a sort of everyman thing, every woman thing, because we've all been through those things, and then we hit, teenagehood, and the child meets the adult, and then it's, again, how do we emerge? How do we find our identity and become an adult in the world and make our way? And then hopefully, and I'm hoping, I've got my fingers crossed, that through maturity we find some sort of redemption, and there is a sort of catharsis. So that was the rhythm of the story. And being a project person and being a sort of project family, I spoke to my son in New York, who's training to be a filmmaker. He's at film school at SVA in New York. And he got quite interested in the idea, and we started exchanging chats, but that would have been a very normal thing for us to do about any of our projects within our family. But then he got really intrigued, and then that was a really dynamic part for me too, and we started speaking, as it were, as fine artist and filmmaker. And so the two languages came together, and that's how the central piece of the project came together.
How would you describe Hotel California to people that haven't been there?
What, in terms of seeing the film?
The film that you did, and the exhibit, both.
Yeah, well, the Hotel California as an exhibit was a way of telling the story in three parts. So the initial story was the movie, the film, the short film that I made with Frederick Paxton. And the idea of that was that you were the voyeur, that you were, constantly going past a hotel bedroom, and it was shown on three screens, and all the three screens were double-sided, as it were. So you could see the film from one side and from the other. So you walked round these screens, and the film was looping round these screens. So you were constantly being taken into a hotel bedroom and viewing a piece of action. And the film was shot on an epic red slow-motion camera, so you're brought right into, the action, and then it was slowed right down for you to sort of perceive. And my idea as an artist was that each frame was like some beautiful, perfect Renaissance painting with all the detail. And Fred's thrust as a filmmaker was to make sure the action was really exciting, and had come up with this wonderful idea of putting the camera on a track. So you were constantly going from one room to the next room, and then black, and then the next room, and then black, and then the next room. So you weren't quite sure in what order you were meant to see things or what you were doing. So that you were the voyeur in that particular room, in a darkened space.
And you're watching a female in a hotel room, and she's alone.
And she's alone, yeah. And it's her three ages. So there is a child, there is a teenager, a young adult, and then there is a mature woman.
But it was the same actress.
Same actress.
That's
I
what
know.
kind of threw me. I don't
Yeah.
know. Did that throw you at all, Nick, or did you?
Yeah, I didn't actually pick up the fact that it was a woman in 3 phases of her life.
Okay.
I didn't, I was just so trying to take everything in. But
But that was a
it makes
conscious
sense.
choice you made to use the same actress, right?
Yeah, I thought it was important. Like, we didn't want to kind of, play with the idea of. We weren't trying to be real. We were trying to have an idea and take you to an atmosphere, a place where you could, even though you were voyeuristic in that first gallery, you hopefully would start to identify, and a bit like Lost in Translation, that kind of that geography of loneliness, where you are away from home, and you've chosen often to be there because it's meant to be a wonderful city and you're a tourist, or you might have been for work or whatever. But so, and strange things happen in hotel rooms, everything happens in hotel rooms, and then of course the chambermaid comes the next day and clears it away, and another set of people come, so it can be very discombobulating, or it can feel very wonderful. And often, and the main feature in a way in the film is the bed, and everything happens on the bed.
Because in a hotel, everything does happen on the bed.
Exactly.
Right?
That's you throw your clothes down, you read,
Watch TV.
if you're working, you read the script, or you sketch your sketches, and you watch TV, and you order room service and everything. So we wanted all of that to be present, and then people could kind of find their way in. And then in the next gallery, the idea was that you were the person. So on that day, we also directed a second camera, which was a stills camera, a very close-up camera. So whilst Fred was directing the actress, the main thrust of the film, there was another camera being directed, which were just very slow still shots, very close up. And then that allowed us to speak about the story in a very, very personal way, that you were now the person.
Okay, so that's what the still photos were about.
That with the still, the big light boxes.
I have to ask you, a lot of people listening to this, this isn't normally a show about art and artists, and I think a lot of people have a hard time relating to art.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, this is Heidi, some artist. I'm not an artist. I'm an MMA fighter, or I work in the industry, or I'm a plumber. And what do you say to that, to people that find it? What's the word I'm looking for? It's hard to relate to something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why, in a way, it's a great job to have, to be an artist, an architect, and so on, because you can play around with ideas, and everybody has an inner landscape, and it doesn't have to be highfalutin. You might have, I don't know, had a tiff with your girlfriend, or you feel sad about something, or, life hasn't quite dealt you the hand you wanted to. But within the whole exhibition, what I was trying to do was create a world. So if you are dealing with these quite difficult things, you want to create a whole world for people to enter, and then they just feel how they feel. Some people just adored the music, for instance, of the film.
What was that music?
It was composed by a guy called Allegre,
okay.
And it's called Have Mercy, O God, and it was composed in about 1600 for the Pope, for a particular saint's day, as I understand it, and it's played at the Vatican once a year, and
okay.
So it's a very sort of spiritual, piece of music.
It's like being in a monastery or the
Yeah,
Vatican or
exactly.
something.
So we were trying to transport people to another place, and then see how that felt, see whether that was interesting to them, And I think a bit like, I don't know whether you've seen Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino's movie. He deals with very difficult subjects. In a very specific way, and in that specific movie, he dealt with it, with cartoons. So there's a piece in that which is about incest.
It's the manga Japanese cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's quite an interesting thing. So this is quite difficult material in terms of and of course you're taking things to an extreme because you're trying to make a point. So it's about how a child is marked, by, you could say, a dark foreboding, but whatever that dark foreboding is, we've all had those things perhaps in our childhood, and then, as I was saying earlier, you then hit adulthood. Teenagehood, and then you go on to mature. So it's really just exploring those different ages of man, of woman, on a very general level, and then you can go in as much as you want. And then in the next gallery, you can feel, after the short film, you can feel whether you want to be part of that thing. And the characters were donated, as I think we mentioned, by colour. So the child was shot in a red set, and the teenager was shot in a blue set, and the mature woman was set in a sort of golden yellow set.
Okay. And you kept with the same actress for all three. Is it because you didn't want it to be obvious? I mean,
yes.
Is that what art is ultimately? Is just it's not obvious?
Yeah, I think for me it's a way of letting other people in and not being arrogant, saying, look, these are the things that I think are interesting. I mean, in architecture, you have a brief and you solve problems, and that's your job. So you might be dealing with very, very interesting conceptual ideas, but the idea is to solve those problems and have an end product. I think in fine art, you're allowed to just put those ideas out there and say, Brian, what do you think? Nick, what do you think?
That's what we do anyway. That's what we do every week.
Yeah.
We just put stuff out there. We don't it doesn't have to have utility or a purpose. It's just expression.
It's just exploring those things, and so I think that's what we're hoping to do.
So you don't think of, say, a target audience per se for your art? Do you think who's going to get something out of this, or should a 5-year-old be able to get something out of it, or
definitely
55-year-old?
Absolutely, and it's a really smart and interesting question. Absolutely, and I really don't like the arrogance that in a way surrounds the art world, and I think it should be that anybody can go in there and get something from it, and actually as a person, I hate reading reviews before I go and see something. I want to just feel what I feel. Afterwards, I'm then fascinated to understand what was in the artist's or filmmakers or architect's mind. That's fantastic, and of course it feels like a great privilege to have that detail, but I initially want to just go and see something and feel it. We used to have a great tradition where every Friday night we'd go and see a film, and it was called Friday Night Film Club. And the only ideal was that the film had just opened, and the idea was that you didn't read a review of it, and it's the best gift because you just go, and as soon as you come out, we used to stand in a circle and everybody gives it marks out of 10, not to be competitive, but just you get that gut reaction. Then you might go away and you chat and you think, oh really, it really shouldn't have been an 8, it was more like a 6, or oh god, I really should have given it a 9, that I didn't realise that, and I gave it a 4. But actually the truth of the matter was that you were just feeling what you wanted to feel. And we had in the second gallery where we had, you mentioned that we had the light boxes, we also had 3 big tents which were lit from above, and they had a series of 21 stills, which was telling, if you like, the story. It was another way of making a film. And they were sort of rather grandly called photo romans, which were a sort of an homage to a filmmaker called Markham who made Le Jeté. And there was great chat at the time of whether it was really a film because it was a series of stills. And that particular film was about hidden memory, which of course our film is about hidden memory. But the tents were fantastic, and I would find, kids just sitting in them, being bathed in the yellow light or bathed in the blue light or bathed, and adults as well. And people would just go and sit in the tents and be, again, marked by the colour, but just to really enjoy the spaces. So it was very playful in that way.
The one thing that kills me is that exhibit is gone now.
I know, it's
so
very sad.
It was up for 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
4 weeks, yeah, something like that, yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with something like that as an artist, because you put this out there and it was like this crazy experience and now it's gone?
The fact that it's transient makes it even more powerful, right?
Or more precious, but, well, I guess... Please answer.
I suppose that's part of our cultural life, that's what happens, and you step aside so someone else can show you something else and go, ooh, look at this, have you thought about this, and of course, I'd have loved it to be there longer, and it was beginning to get quite a momentum, and people were coming back 2 or 3 times and bringing their friends because they were enjoying the interactiveness of it, and the difference between the 3 galleries. And we haven't mentioned the last gallery, which in fact was the set, which we had then deconstructed.
Right.
So it was a very straightforward set that I had designed as a hotel room with actually the 4th wall missing, so you were the voyeur. But in the final gallery, I wanted it to be just apocalyptic. And so it was shot with the blue light, and the wind machine was still going. And so it was as if all the human beings that had ever been in that room had left, you know, and you were just left with this space. And then you then could put yourself back there, and what did that feel like, you know?
And coming back to the hotel rooms and how you felt that they left a lasting impression on you, do you believe in the idea that spaces and rooms can have certain energies that are beyond what's available to the eye, that can affect you on a deep level, might even be a spiritual level, or whatever, however you want to call it?
Yeah, I really do, and in a way, I would have to argue that, as you know, as having been trained as sort of an architect, that you hope that you can influence people's lives by the way you design the space that they live in or they work in. Mm-hmm. But I do feel that they carry memories and they carry a sort of karma. So
basically, you're not going to have any of your architectural designs built upon an Indian burial ground anytime soon.
Let's hope not. Yeah. Well, maybe that'd be cool. And maybe I think we do have to respect those things that matter. And I think you learn that too. If hopefully you're not an arrogant architect, if people come to you with a project, you listen to their brief and you listen to what matters to them, and then you try and respond to that. Mm-hmm. Somebody recently came to a house that fairly recently finished for the family up in Hampstead, a very, very modern piece. And they said, well, what do you dislike about it? And I said, well, it's hard for me to say what I dislike about it because we just designed it for our family, you know. Mm-hmm. But if you came to me with a brief, and, you know, it would be a very different spot, because I would be trying to respond to what makes you feel, you know, good, or how you like to work or how you like to live.
So do you ever walk into a hotel room or into a gallery or into a theatre and just instantly feel, oh, there's something wrong with the energy of the space?
I do, and I wouldn't use those terms, but I would understand exactly what you meant by them. And I think that when a piece of architecture really sings and in a way has a spiritual level, whatever it is, whether it is an office or somewhere you live or a theatre, it means that somebody has invested in a huge conceptual idea and also been very, very mindful of the complete language that they bring to that thing. So everything feels relaxed and good to you. And I sometimes sort of, when people ask me what I mean by that, I liken it to, you know, if you go to a restaurant and it's just a lovely atmosphere and it's a good place, but the waiter is really annoying, you know, or the food just takes so long to come, you're suddenly conscious that the food hasn't come, that this person is not getting what you need or whatever, and then you feel uncomfortable. But as soon as everything sort of runs smoothly and you get the vibe of the place, and you just feel completely comfortable. So for me, that's when architecture really works. But there's
it's basically it's a function of Gestalt more than anything else.
What's that word? Sorry.
If I'm not mistaken, Gestalt is the.
Oh, Gestalt. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. It is. Yes, I think so. Yes.
Is that like a feng shui version of German, or what is that? Is everything in the right place?
Well, Gestalt is when something becomes more than the sum of its parts. If I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
Did you revisit a bunch of like hotel movies, like The Shining, Lost in Translation, Somewhere, before you did this exhibit?
I didn't. I can't
think of any others. Can you think of any others? Breakfast at Tiffany's? No,
Breakfast
that's not
yeah. I'd like to have gone to Breakfast at Tiffany's. The Audrey Hepburn. Wow, she was a proper woman, wasn't she? Yeah.
She was really on her game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, I think I didn't revisit them. I was very aware of them, and so and they were also became a kind of common language that I could use with Frederick in order to try and explain what I might have in my head. So when I spoke about the hotel room, I spoke about The Shining, and then he then came with all the thoughts about the cameras, and so, you know, and how we could lay a track and do it in a specific way that we have done it. You know.
That movie still freaks me out. If I'm alone and it comes on and he's playing in the hallway and the little girls show up and the elevator opens up with the blood, I mean, I will get physically scared. I mean, it is something creepy about it.
It's still one of the most scary movies, isn't it? It is. Yeah. And I have seen it reasonably, yeah. And, you know, in the hotel room and the twins, that twinning thing too, you know, and the mirror image and all of those things, just so powerful.
The empty hotel is a scary thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, I think the way that it all seems so reasonable up front, doesn't it? And everybody's reasonable and fine. And then slowly, almost like the dream sequence, do you remember the rush of red water?
Yeah.
And
blood, isn't
the
it?
blood, yeah. But that doesn't come till way later on.
Yeah,
And
you're
so
right, it's later.
the sort of fantasy things of it. And then that's when you start getting a feeling of unhingedness. Whatever that word is, freaked
scared right now
outness.
thinking
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
You something I wanted your opinion on, Brian, is what's your thoughts on those like super wealthy older people who just start living in hotels? They'll just rent out like the penthouse suite or the top floor or whatever for like the last 10 years of their life.
I think it's
Isn't
dope.
that weird?
I mean, like a Howard Hughes.
Yeah.
Then they stop
Sounds
touching
like-
people too. I actually lived in a hotel for 5 months when I was in New York City, and it was a really weird experience and really trippy. I mean, I can kind of see why people do it. Maybe they do it because they don't want to be completely antisocial. I thought you were going to say, what about wealthy people that get these, and you must have experience with this, that build these huge 15-bedroom homes only to go and completely detach from the rest of the world. I don't know, maybe it's their way of trying to get some attachment by being in a hotel. I don't know. Do you have experience with people like that? Or?
I don't. I've certainly had, we've designed buildings for, for people who have quite big homes, but I haven't had a particularly,
Recluse.
somebody who is reclusive or, But I mean, I've lived in hotels, obviously when I was little, but also, whilst we've been waiting to build buildings and so on and so on. And I kind of like them, but because they're part of my early landscape. And there's a very interesting guy called Peter Zumpfer, who's a Swiss writer and architect, and he talks about atmospheres in a way that I would really relate to, and he says that it's all there, in your childhood. If your grandmother's, kitchen was a place you felt safe and wonderful, which, was one of his examples for himself, and he to this day loves big diamond black and white tiles because that was the kitchen, and big oak doors, so for him. But I think hotels can feel very secure and you know where you are. There's a routine, the meals come. So if you're kind of elderly, actually that's a really good idea for me
Al
when I
Capone.
get really old. I'm
Al Capone lived in a hotel.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of all the others.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I
Trump
started to watch
Trump
your
is a hotel. Oh.
yeah, your recommendation, Boardwalk Empire.
Oh, Boardwalk
Intense,
Empire. He lives in a
yeah.
hotel. Nucky Thompson from Boardwalk Empire.
Intense.
I do want to ask you: is everyone an artist?
Yeah, they potentially are.
Okay.
And I think it's it's quite interesting too how well, again, another really, really big question, but I always immediately my mind flips to the fact that whenever there is a tsunami in the world or a disaster in the world, what happens, of course, is that you need to get the infrastructure right and the medics out there, but also what happens is that people try and get out there and work with children, and they draw and they paint. And so it's, there's a fabulous cathartic side of these things, but that isn't the thing that interests me. The thing that interests me is the ideas and people's stories. And so if you want to draw, you want to write, you want to paint, that's fantastic. And that is actually just paying attention to your inner landscape.
Something that I've always I've had an issue with when it comes to artists is there's those specific pieces or creations where you can see, or at least I believe that it's almost infantile. It's like someone's just taken a few straight lines and put them at a certain angle, and then he's put like a £10,000 price tag on it, and there doesn't seem to be any skill involved in certain kind of art forms. Like someone will take some mud and splatter on a page, and then what are your thoughts on that? I've always had an issue with that.
I think you are not alone. I think most people feel that, and they won't pay money for art unless they feel there's a real skill there. But for me, I don't feel the same way. I think that you could say that it's somebody getting right at the very heart of the matter. And if those marks on that paper have a resonance, if you allow yourself to feel very open to maybe that mark or that splatter, then you might feel that same resonance. And, there are, fabulous Aboriginal, drawings, paintings, all of these things that come from an absolute base, an absolute gut thing, that do have resonance for people. And so it's just feeling very sort of open-minded. And I think, too, that if a serious artist says, this is art to me, then that is what it is. That doesn't mean that you have to like it or have to respond to it.
I understand it's really subjective, but I mean, the example that springs to mind is several years ago there was some 4-year-old kid in the States, if I'm not mistaken, who was doing the crudest smearings of paint on some canvas, and I think her parents or someone said, "Oh, this could pass for modern art," and they packaged it up, and it sold for vast sums in galleries. And then when people found out that it wasn't being created by a regular artist, apparently they didn't sell it well anymore, or they might have even sold more. I can't remember.
And they probably felt duped and all the rest of it. Yeah.
And then it reminds me of I don't know why I'm drawing parallel between this, but we had a wine guy on, and I related the story of how they took a bunch of wine connoisseurs and they did a blindfold taste test, and these guys got everything wrong, and it's kind of, there's so much like.
But if it just speaks to you,
yeah.
Go ahead.
But sorry, are we allowed to say bullshit? It is it's a load of old bullshit, and that's that's what I think we were touching on earlier on when I was talking to you about the film club. Go to that thing without knowing whether, the critic said it's the best thing since sliced bread or not. In fact, the same friend who I visit in LA, the writer, we set up something that we do every January, and we call it the Turner Prize, but it's the Anthea Turner Prize, actually. And it's, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the idea was, and there's an article about it, actually, on Days Confused, which I could always tell you about, so your viewers or listeners could go and read that thing. But his big thrust was that if I didn't know that was by a famous artist, would I be buying it?
That's a very good question.
That is good.
And therefore we said to everybody we knew, we sent out a letter to everyone we know, send in a piece of art, whether you be a writer, an accountant, an artist, a filmmaker, a student, whatever. And in the end we got 50 exhibits, and I had at that time a lovely big studio down in Islington, and we just they had a deadline, so they had to come by a particular time on Friday night, and we unwrapped them and we put them all up. We curated them as beautifully as we could, and then we invited a bunch of people to come and look at them and then vote for the thing that they liked best. And it was so interesting, and everybody was just given 5 gold stars, so you could only use your 5 gold, whoever came in through the door, you had to put your 5 gold stars. And it's a fascinating thing. So if we're not told that this is a Picasso, I think though in the end those people who have big ideas and big things to say, whether they're saying them in by a mark on the paper or an extraordinary painting, will rise to the top, because what they're doing is that they're hopefully, in the same way that we're trying to do down at Hotel California, say, this is a bunch of ideas, see what you think. Does it have resonance? Does it make you think beyond your everyday, And
See,
I think
if it speaks to you, though, it has value. Whether it's a 4-year-old or not. I mean, if it speaks to you, then it has value. And I think over time, it will tell, whether it's art or not. I mean, and just speaking of bullshit, I mean, you live in the art world. How much of what you see is bullshit? I mean, like...
Well,
it's so subjective.
It is. No. It's again very, very interesting
is it 60%
question.
Or 70%?
I don't percentages. I don't have to say hand in heart. I don't think it's bullshit. I think those people who really are trying to say something, usually there is a sort of there is a conscious, thrust and constant thought that actually they are good and that they are good. Of course, it is not always fair. There will be plenty of artists out there who won't have a voice, who are very, very good indeed, and it's just luck that, Mr. Saatchi came into the gallery and said, I'll buy all of those paintings. You like all things, you have to get lucky.
Like, as an example, I see Damien Hirst put a bunch of diamonds on a human skull and call it For the Love of God and try to sell it for 100 million pounds or whatever it was. And I just think, okay, pure marketing genius. Art 0. And Damien, we would love to have you on the show, but I just think art 0, marketing genius 100. When you see something like that, what do you think?
I think that particular piece is quite interesting, because I think that, particularly given, the world we live in right now in terms of, the financial situation we are. So, so we could say, he's trying to say, look, here world, this has all gone mad, we can just throw diamonds at these things. There's a lot of things that you could say he was trying to say.
The sale itself is the art. It's a comment on ourselves that he can
But
actually sell
think,
it.
Yeah, but I think the important thing for him is that he goes on making good work. And I think that the problem can be that if, the commercial side, if you like, of your practice becomes so monumental, is the time in that space, is the time in that studio to be really wrestling with the big questions and putting out really, really good art. So
But
actually...
he mass produces art. I mean, he's known for doing that.
Yeah.
And so did Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
I mean, he mass produced it. It was it was called The Factory, wasn't it?
It was called The Factory, but he was a great manipulator of things, and he understood exactly what he's doing, as does Damien Hirst. And
As in he's kind of making a joke that he's doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, he's working the system, and de Kooning in America is doing the same.
Okay.
And I think that we just have to be aware of that, But I think Damien Hirst has made the most extraordinary pieces of work. I think that his latter projects haven't had that power, and maybe that always happens to artists as they continue through age. Maybe not, or maybe just the sheer commerciality of his. His boat, his empire is just a difficult place to do.
I saw one of his exhibits in 1997. It was the Royal Academy, and it was a cow's head that was in a plexiglass container, and it was being decomposed and eaten by maggots and flies. And it was this two plexiglass pieces, and you could watch it over the course of a few weeks getting eaten alive.
See, I don't think of that as art. I just think it's just disgusting.
But you weren't there.
But don't you think that might say something about
You?
life and death? It might say something about you, but it might say something about life and death, and the fact that in the end we will maybe all return to the earth and the flies and the worms, and so I think that's quite a profound
It's not
piece.
the statement that I find lacking in virtue. It's the fact that that doesn't require any skill. I don't know. I'm not a handyman. I'm not a particularly artistic person, but I could also mount a cow's head between two pieces of plexiglass.
But you didn't.
But I didn't. But it doesn't, you know what I mean?
Two guys could also start talking on a microphone somewhere in another country.
They're not as cool as
but
us,
they
though.
didn't.
They're not as cool, to be fair.
Is it that simple?
Yeah.
Or what is,
I don't know. I think
Nick has a point.
I think he does have a point, but I think it is that simple. You didn't have that idea, and that's what artists do. That they do have those ideas, and they are particular people in that world, and you have just been witness to Heidi's world. That is Heidi's world.
Yeah, but you see that your exhibition that required some skill. You can see that a lot of labor and effort and planning and aesthetic.
Is that the definition of art?
I like. That's my definition. I mean, it's something that reflects the beauty of the divine or beyond it. That's actually Osho's definition. He says art is something that makes you reflect on the divine, something that makes you think, fuck, there's more to life than this.
But does that require skill to do that?
I like to think so, dude. Okay. Actually, no. Maybe seeing a cow's head decomposing makes you think.
I can still remember it, so it had some effect on me.
Yeah, I do think that's a genius piece of work, and I think he should be applauded for it. And end of. I think it is a big idea, But I get, and I have this conversation all the time with people, that they want to see some skill in something,
I mean, I heard the other day, there was some guy in France a couple of years ago, he cut off his penis in front of a pseudo audience as performance art. I mean, where do you draw the line? Do you know what I mean?
That might just have been the line. That might just have been it. I don't know.
Maybe that was it.
It's like,
I guess art is just for art's sake.
But you could say, in Damien's, defense or defense of all artists, that actually it takes a highly tuned mind. A lot of space has to come around, and things have to be thought about to actually come up with an idea of how do I show mortality and death in an extraordinary way that everybody will go, whoa, that's extraordinary, So maybe, that's his skill. He's not an athlete, he's not he's not drawing things, but he's coming up with those big ideas. And I'm really seduced by that. I really like that. And I like when I meet people who, whether they be philosophers or writers or filmmakers, who are giving us big ideas, as we talked about The Shining, Lost in Translation. Those are big ideas,
What do you say to people that they're like, Heidi, I work 50 hours a week, I come home, I watch Boardwalk Empire on the TV, I would play with my kids, I don't have I have time for my art in my life, I just don't have the time, I don't even know what you three are talking about with the cows' heads and stuff. I mean, what do you say to people like that? I mean, that don't know how to get art in their life?
Oh, well, first of all, it sounds like quite a lovely life if you go home to your family and you play with your kids and all of those things.
Good.
I suppose for me, it's always just been so part of my background. But I would say if you're living in London, my God, that's fantastic. You can walk out anywhere, and actually I think I survived having two, very small children by being able to walk out in London with my fabulous late husband, walk down to the South Bank, go into the Royal Festival Hall, grab a bite, go to a bookstore, maybe buy a second-hand book, go into a gallery. Most galleries are free in London,
So this is an art lover city for sure.
Oh, there's just so many possibilities.
Yeah.
You're talking about the review earlier, and I agree. I like to see a film. I don't want to know anything about it. I hate previews on films. I just don't even look at them.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't. I want to go in cold.
Yeah.
Completely
exactly
cold, which is,
the same.
it's hard these days with a movie because you're at least going to see a poster, you're going to see something. But the one thing, I go to the National Gallery a lot. First of all, I found that as the older I get, I appreciate art more, which is weird. But I go to the National Gallery and you see a painting and then you're allowed to appreciate it. I go to the Tate Modern, I see a piece of modern art and there's a description about what that art means. And I always find that frustrating about the Tate Modern because it doesn't leave it to your own opinion. It almost tells you what the artist was thinking and this is why they do it because society is this.
Yeah.
Is it just me?
No, well, I think probably you're talking about two different kinds, different times in art.
Okay.
And so maybe one was much more descriptive, was almost photographic. And then, of course, photographs came along and took over from that representational kind of art. But I do know what you mean, and I think it is fantastic to be able to wander around and not know. And I do the show twice always. The exhibition, I go and I want to have that immediate reaction, and then I go around and I want to read and I can, agree or disagree.
Okay. Interesting.
I actually prefer to see descriptions because then at least I know what's
Well, I mean,
What's
sometimes
he doing? Yeah.
I mean, at the Tate Modern, sometimes you really don't. I mean, sometimes you could be like, should this have been cleaned up, my maintenance kind of thing. So sometimes it's good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really out there. But
I mean, it could be argued that it's your analytical mind wanting to fill in the blanks that the right brain isn't giving it. I mean, when I was in your exhibition, a little description would have helped me immeasurably, but that's just because I don't have a sophisticated artist's eye.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, Brian. What do you think? I mean, do you prefer to? You said you don't like seeing the description.
yeah, but I mean, I kind of understand it now. I think I'll do what Heidi does next time. I'll go around first and then read the bits.
Yeah. It was great actually in the show. We had some what they sort of rather grandly called the artist tours, but one particular session, a lot of students turned up. They must have heard about it, and they just had such fascinating questions about the show, which made me think about the show in very different ways. And they were seeing things that I hadn't seen. So this is a really two-way street. And of course, art is also about just connecting with people and being really connected. And so, a bit like these conversations, and one person said to me, well, I think your film is all about loss. And I hadn't thought about it like that at all. I think I'd thought about it as a cycle of life, and what did that mean? But they were saying, well, it's all about loss, and life is about loss, a loss of innocence initially, and then, so on and so forth. So it's that can be fascinating too.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
The more I hear Heidi talk about this, the more I think about London Real. And in some weird way, this is our form of art. And as we get feedback sometimes that's almost more important than the podcast. It's like the feedback and the interaction. And some people get some things from it and other people get other things from it. It's kind of trippy in that way.
That's interesting.
Heidi, is it true that you used to be a fashion model for Christian Dior? Come on.
I think that would be overemphasizing it very definitely. when I left school a year early and I got a place at Chelsea School of Art, And so, but I wanted to be in London. So my mum said to me, well, you've got to go and work somewhere that I know, because I was sort of only 17. And the great thing was that my sister had a flat here, so I had somewhere to live. That was okay. So I just went round the sort of shops, the names she knew, Elizabeth Arden, Christian Dior, and they just happened to need what they call a house model, which is a bit different from being a model. And the idea is that, do you know Sketch on Conduit Street, which is a very sort of cool gallery and restaurant now? That was the building, so that was my first job. And there were three ladies, rather grand ladies, and they were called vendeuses, and they had their client list. And my job was to put on whatever the couture garments. And of course I was 17 and skinny and little at that stage, you know. And so you put on the garments for the client to be able to see.
Or for like a private viewing.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So, for instance, Princess Margaret would come in and say, well, I loved, you know, the blue Georgette, or whatever she would say.
That's a good accent.
And so I'd go and put on the blue Georgette and stand there. And they, of course, the vendeuse had her particular measurements. And so she would say, I'd like that, but I would like it to be a little bit shorter or have slightly longer arms or, you know, in length or whatever. So really, you know, saying that I was the house model. And it was great fun, of course, because I got to wear all these beautiful things and learn to curtsy whilst carrying bales of fabric, which was good because, you know, a lot of royal people would come in. But in a way, the most fun was they still at that time, down in the basement, had the people who made these beautiful couture garments, and talk about works of art and an endeavour and labour, you know. There was a beautiful French lady there who probably was maybe 60, you know. In my mind she was, you know, it's when you're younger everybody seems older. And she sewed on sequins onto Georgette. You know, that's all her job was, into these beautiful gowns, you know. And I learnt actually to pattern cut, because they cut everything from scratch and all the beautiful, you know, bales of fabric. So there was great beauty there. It was fantastic. By the end of my year there, I was very fed up of sort of, you know, being absolutely thoroughly made up, and, you know, I had long blonde hair, and they pile that up in a great bun and make you up absolutely immaculately. So I think I've reacted a bit against it when I first went to art school and chopped off all my hair, and, you know.
I have a hard time seeing art and fashion. I mean, you see all the runway shows, like the latest couture, and it seems so far out there. And I have a hard time relating that to art, back to people who we are. It always seems something like I ignore when I see fashion models.
I'm exactly the same.
Can you educate me as to
yeah. I mean, I think when it's very, very high end, again, you know, same thing, coming back to big ideas. They're dealing with very, very big ideas, and then what happens? So
what does that mean when you said big ideas?
Just a big thought, you know. It might be I'm going to design something all in black because that makes me feel about grief, or it's about the silhouette, about the cut of something, a structure, a sculpture. I mean, I'm not here to kind of argue for fashion, but I do think there are some extraordinary designers who are dealing with very interesting things. And then, of course, it gets sort of filtered through.
Trickle down to where you buy something on the high street.
Exactly. But equally, fashion is very clever at picking up, you know, themes from fine artists too, you know. So I would say there are some amazing fashion designers out there who really are sort of fine artists in lots of ways.
Steve McQueen was one, I think you could argue.
You could argue that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Izzy Miyake, fantastic, you know, Japanese fashion designer who I think trained initially as an architect, you know. So he brought all those kind of very sculptural ideas. And I think they're you know, clothes are our outer wrapper. It's what we wrap ourselves in, and we like to, you know, we show the world who we are. It's part of our identity, at a very basic level. And architecture, same. Architecture is the thing that we wrap ourselves in, or, you know, fine art, where, you know, in, you know, particular show that we've been talking about, you know, my show in Shoreditch was about making an atmosphere, a world that you get completely embedded in, and you start thinking about those thoughts, those ideas, whether they be playful or light or a little bit, you know, deeper. doesn't matter.
It's just you really want to challenge someone's brain ultimately.
Yeah, I think isn't that the only thing that's interesting?
Yeah.
Also, I don't think we want to get to sort of a grand old age and not have some wisdom, having been a little bit analytical about our lives or, our political landscape or the things that have happened to us or our family. So I think all of these things allow us that way in, and if we take them a little bit seriously and give ourselves a bit of time. And we were talking earlier before we started our chat about yoga, and it's the only sort of form of a sort of physical exercise. I'm not even sure you can call it that the way I do it. It's very gentle, but I think that gives you space to breathe and think, and maybe we need a bit more of that, and particularly if we live in big cities. And part of the thrust of our architectural practice, because I trained at the Royal College of Art, which was all about making buildings in London, in a big metropolis, is how do we find peace and quiet in our cities? How do we, give ourselves, space to think about things, whether it be fashion or books or art or yoga,
You're an architect, Heidi. What do you think of the London skyline?
I think it's great, and I think it should be taller and higher and much more like New York. And
Really?
I think we should never cop out. And I think every single time, we make a tall building, like the Shard, like the Gherkin, we make it too small.
Really?
Go for it, I say. Go for it. Yeah, of course. We have the technology now. And I don't think we ever regret something that we do, which is fantastic and big and interesting.
Why is it conservative? Why is London conservative, or the UK in that sense?
I think it's just historical that we like, we used to very much so, and I think this has changed, value what is historic.
Right.
So when I started architecture, what was valued, as it were, even for the financial world, was a panelled lined room. You would be in safe hands if you were in a panelled lined room.
It's funny how you talk about that.
Whereas, and we didn't value something that was modern and interesting. New York, wow.
Opposite.
Well, you come up fantastic opposite. And I remember going as an architectural student to New York and just being blown away, by the fact that you could live in that way, in these big loft spaces and just be brave about what you were doing. So if you ask me about the skyline, I say, go taller, go higher. And that doesn't mean, compromising beautiful views of St. Paul's or any of those things. We don't need to do that. We still have plenty of space to go up into the sky and delight ourselves,
I like the Shard, but when I get up close to it, I don't like it as much as far away.
Don't you?
I feel like they could have. And then the top, I'm still trying to figure out the top.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't been to London, it's the tallest building in Western Europe now. Is that right?
I think that's right.
It's
isn't
like a
it?
big shard of glass, and then the top isn't actually closed at the top, so it really bothers me. But maybe that's what it's there to do, to bother me.
Maybe it's got a decomposing cow's head on the top that we haven't seen.
No, but the three pieces
Maybe
at the
it's
top.
so the helicopter can land for the chief exec.
This is a good question for you, Heidi. Like the three pieces at the top don't connect into a point.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's there just to make you think, why aren't they connecting into a point?
I wouldn't say so. I think that the architect would have, been drawing that beautifully. In our parlance, in our language, we talk about things which are tense or not tense, and so when you're making sculptural spaces, you talk about not, trying to not make things feel tense. And I think by allowing, if you like, the light and the sunshine in that particular way, and I'm sure he will have drawn it a million times to just make it pleasing to himself, And I think, that links us directly back to those marks on the paper, that some marks are just incredibly pleasing. I don't know whether you know an architect called Alvar Aalto, Swedish architect, and he designed the most beautiful buildings which had beautiful curves. And I think you'd all know he also designed beautiful objects as well, and there is what's called an Alvar Aalto vase, which has this beautiful curve in it, which echoes a lot of the forms that he made in buildings. And if you look at that, how did he dissect that curve? What was that decision? But that was just for him making beauty. And I'm sure, the top of the Shard is all about making the most beautiful thing.
It's not pretty to me.
Not pretty to you.
What do you think is the most beautiful building in the world, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Oh,
She's going to make some enemies now.
No,
Come on, Heidi, give us the real deal.
Gosh, I don't know. God, that's a really tough one because there's
not
so
that hard.
many.
What's the first thing that pops into your mind?
The first thing that pops into my mind is California. Some of those fantastic.
Which ones?
The Frank Lloyd Wright, fabulous kind of California cabins, and I think that's to do with my fantasy of light, of letting light beautifully into buildings in that way. So I think they
It's
would
like the
have to be-
cantilevered residences he did and all that stuff. Okay.
exactly. So you know
You were thinking skyscraper, weren't you?
You were thinking maybe no.
No? Okay, I was.
It's that
Interesting.
inside outside. It's that inside outside, and
Okay.
maybe there's probably still something in me that I would like. That's still a challenge because I've always lived and worked in London and made buildings in London. So I think I have to probably turn my head to California and the sunshine
Fair enough.
and take on that idiom. So I think that's probably what's rolling around in
I
my
thought of the
brain.
World Trade Center. That's what I thought right away.
Did
Really?
you? Gosh.
Yeah, which is interesting because Nick was saying how it doesn't look like it would require any skill. It's basically two sticks next to each other. But
Yeah.
I remember being under there and just marveling in it,
Really?
in the beauty, the symmetry, and the simpleness of
It is
these
very
two
simple, isn't it?
straight
Yeah.
things in the air. But they were so impressive and imposing down there on the tip of Manhattan.
I just always like contrast that with like, it sounds so hippie, but if you contrast man's designs in our cities with nature's, they always fall short in my opinion.
What are you comparing it to? Like a tree?
Like a plant or a tree. Like
they're beautiful as well.
it just seems
Well-
so crude and angular and harsh in comparison. You know, it's just me being a hippie. But
maybe it's the
I think
contrast
it's a
that
good,
makes
I think
the
it's
art.
a good argument. I mean, just before I came here, I was very sad because I read an obituary for Oscar Niemeyer, who is a fabulous Brazilian architect. I think he was Brazilian. I hope I've got that right. And he made beautiful, soft, fabulous, undulating, buildings as within the modern idiom. But also, I think. Oh, I'm just thinking of Ronchamp, which is a chapel that Corbusier made in Switzerland, and that is extraordinary.
Really?
And I think you'd really like that. That's curving walls and beautiful sort of shafts of light. Absolutely sensational. Beautiful, beautiful spiritual building.
Heidi, we've only got a few minutes left, but I need to ask you two more questions. The first one is, what advice do you have for that, 22-year-old girl or boy out there that wants to one day grow up and be like Heidi and to be an artist, or an architect or a fashion designer? What do you tell them?
I tell them not to get the wrong Heidi and not the one, which is the story where, she has to hang out with her grandfather in the mountains, but to be the Heidi that just grasp everything, follow your dream, and try and be confident, try and believe in yourself that you can do those things, but they happen step by step. So, when it feels so enormous sometimes, but just go to the thing that you really love doing with all your heart, and somehow I think the world, pays you back, and I think the world does give you what you need sometimes and not what you want. But if you're very authentically, going to the thing that means something to you, or else for me the world has no meaning. So go to the thing that means something to you, work as hard as you possibly can, and try and do that thing. If it doesn't mean something to you, then don't do it. I'm not judgmental about that, but for me, that's the most exciting thing, to be able to be creative in the world and have projects. And that's why I'm hoping I'm going to be a 110-year-old biddy somewhere, but still doing my projects.
You'll be designing art until you die.
Hopefully. But I think also it is crucial that a lot of people will argue, go and be that banker because you can write your book anytime. You can't. You can't. You have to go to the main thrust of the thing that you care about first with all your energies. Then go and find a way of making a living. You can be that waitress, you can be that barman, you can do those things.
Because you might not have that enthusiasm later.
Yeah, and it's very easy once you've got a lifestyle. You've got an apartment and a family, and how you're going to be the writer when you've done all of those things, or the artist, or the architect. And they are tough, these things, and they're tough decisions. And it's a people are emerging into a much tougher world economically than I emerged into. I had many more choices, I'm sure. I think the dice was very much on my side, and dice isn't necessarily on young people's side at the moment. But go for
Very
it.
considered answer.
It's very good advice. And the last question I have is if you could make a phone call now to the 22-year-old Heidi Locher, what advice would you give her?
I would probably, it would be very similar advice probably, but I don't think I needed to give myself that advice because I felt quite brave. I think I would say, don't be too internal. Don't let the voices overtake the confidence and the creativity that is in there, Heidi. Believe that you can do it and that you will have a joyful and marvellous life if you do that thing. And of course we all have doubts and we doubt ourselves, but if we can just turn the volume down slightly on those voices, on those doubts. So I would say to me, just turn the volume down. But maybe that's just a general, well, maybe I should just turn the volume down anyway.
That's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask earlier. Do you ever, when you're creating like Hotel California or any piece of art, do you ever think to yourself, they're going to see right through this. There's nothing here. This is not good enough for an exhibition. Or are you past that? Those kind of feelings?
It isn't that I'm past that, but that isn't necessarily my problem. I mean, I have other problems, but my problem is I have too many ideas. Okay. And so when I start thinking about things, I throw absolutely everything at it, all the ideas. And then it's the distilling, it's the editing process that I have to really watch so that I feel that it is really layered and really considered and a really deep, proper piece of work. And if I don't feel that, then it's not going out of the studio, end of. But also I feel I'm letting myself down and letting everybody around me down. I would be embarrassed, if you went there and said, oh, it's all very nice, Heidi, but I can't see anything interesting in it. That's not who I am. So there's this sort of big geeky bit of me that wants to make sure that there are powerful big ideas in there. I think I've said that a few times today. And, so that isn't necessarily my problem. I have other things that I would feel worried about, but not necessarily that.
Wow. I think we were both attracted by your art, but I think we both fell in love with your enthusiasm. You're just very engaging Inspired. To talk to. And I was really surprised, when we first met you, because a lot of artists, they put their art out there and then they go inward, and it's just really nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's been great pleasure chatting to you.
If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to have a house designed by your architecture firm or anything, what's the best way?
Just to go on the website, I suppose, www.studiolocher.
Studio Locher.
Studio Locher, yeah.
Okay, and you're on Twitter as well. Is it Studio Locher?
It is Studio Locher. It's just easier that way, and then, that's everything there, yeah.
Okay, and what's next for you? What's coming up next year for you?
Oh, really exciting things, actually. I'm glad you asked me. I'm starting to design what we've been calling a sort of a couture furniture, which is a series of furniture. So when we've been designing our buildings, we've always been making all the furniture as well. So that series of furniture, which defines spaces and makes sculptural places, will be starting to happen next year.
Wow. That's quite a different art form, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it's always been part of our landscape as designers within Studio Locher and part of making the architecture. And then Frederick and I have a new project called Strange Hinterland, which is a short film that we have to get funded and think about and draw and exchange ideas. So we want to make that next year. I think I'm guest editing a fabulous new magazine, men's culture and fashion magazine called Article, and I think I'm their guest art director and artist for their first issue, which I'm really excited about. That's cool. And they came to the show and loved all the circular things, and so there's an idea about the circle within the first edition, which is exciting, and hopefully some other, and hopefully another show at the end of the year. So I think we've got our work cut out. Actually.
No flies on Heidi. I mean, if you ever think you have a busy life, Jesus.
Oh, I feel I'm very lucky that I can have a project-based life. Mm-hmm. It's great.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I just want to say to our listeners on iTunes, if you'd enjoy this, if you could just give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review, let us know what you think. Nick is going off to Peru next week to check out the ayahuasca experience there. Mm-hmm. If you want to hear about our first ayahuasca experience, I think it's episode number 23 and 24. It's called Ayahuasca Ready to Die and Ayahuasca Back from the Dead. Have you done ayahuasca?
No, but I want to go now. I'm jealous.
You can go with Nick.
Are we doing another show?
Oh yeah, we might have another show next week. But yeah. So yeah. There you go. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, Heidi.
Thanks. It's been a joy. Lovely to chat.
Nice
Thank
to meet you, Heidi.
A lot of fun.
Thanks a lot.
And until then,
It's about the journey.
indeed. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
To this day, I can't remember some of my fights, like from, I don't know, one from about round 7 onwards to round 10.
Seriously?
So I had painkillers injected 10 minutes before the fight in my wrists and in my neck.
Is that legal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've come to realise that I was adopted when I was a child.